Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 830, and today is August 21st, 2025. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. A lot of news to get into on today's show. First, I want to remind people to check out the Kyle Anzalone show. This week, I've done a solo show. I had James Cardin on yesterday to talk about the chances that Trump will be able to get a deal to end the war in Ukraine. And today at 4:45, Jeremy R. Hammond, author, one of my colleagues over at the Libertarian Institute, will be joining the show to talk about Gaza, the situation there, and generally with Israel. So subscribe to that show. It is the first link in the show notes page. And with that, let's get into the news I have for you guys today. I have been doing a lot of writing. Almost all the stories on today's show are ones that I have written either for the Libertarian Institute or judgenap.com. You could go either of those websites to find my articles, or you could just follow me on my Ed's handle, Kyle Anzalone _. All right, so starting off with this one, I wrote for the Institute on August 19th. U.S. deploys 3 warships near Venezuela. President Donald Trump is sending 3 destroyers, spy planes, and an attack submarine to the South Caribbean Sea to combat drug traffickers. In a report published on Monday, Reuters cited 2 officials who expressed that 3 U.S. Aegis-guided missile destroyers will arrive off the coast of Venezuela in the next 36 hours as a part of an effort to address the threats from Latin American drug cartels. A separate official told the outlet that the deployment will include spy planes and an attack submarine. The official estimate that a total of 4,000 U.S. soldiers will be involved in the operations. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported that Trump had secretly signed an order authorizing the U.S. military to take actions against cartels in international waters and even on foreign soil. Since taking office, the Trump administration has designated several Latin American cartels as specifically designated global terrorist. In July, the Venezuelan cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns, was added to the list. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has claimed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is the leader of the Cartel de los Soles, with the State Department recently placing a $50 million bounty on Maduro. One of the officials speaking with Reuters said the warships will be authorized to conduct targeted strikes, not only surveillance and intelligence operations. And so I've been warning about this for some time, really since Trump said that his Secretary of State was going to be Marco Rubio. He is a huge hawk when it comes to Latin America, wants to overthrow every government down there that's not directly aligned with the U.S. because for some reason, the Cold War is still going on in little Marco's brain, and he wants to get us into new fights in South America. I'm very concerned that they are going to try something like, I think, 1989 Panama when they arrested Noriega. I think George H.W. Bush used about 20,000 forces for that. Of course, this, would likely be different. Warfare has changed a lot over the past 3.5 decades, of course, and I would guess we would more see standoff, targeted strikes. I'm not sure what capabilities the Venezuelans would have. Certainly inside Venezuela, I would guess there's probably a fairly formidable force. It's a jungle country, in large parts. So I would guess the U.S. would have a hard time conducting ground operations in Venezuela. I'm not sure, Venezuela's anti-ship missile capabilities, anti-aircraft capabilities, and if they would in any meaningful way be able to stand up against Washington if we did just conduct, limited number of strikes, a few tomahawks here and there, lobbing those into Venezuela, how the Venezuelan government would, or if it could respond to that. But I do think that's something that we need to be talking about quite a bit. I'm trying to do a little bit more research on Venezuela myself to get a better feel for the Venezuelan capabilities and how this could all play out. But got a big red flag here that the Trump administration is going to try something. And Venezuela appears to have a similar response. Maduro mobilizes militia, says no empire will touch sacred soil of Venezuela. So Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro ordered the mobilization of 4.5 million troops in response to the U.S. deploying several warships to the South Caribbean. On Monday, Reuters reported, and we already got into this, about the 3 destroyers, spy planes, and attack submarine. And of course, Rubio claiming Maduro is the leader of Cartel de los Soles. I did add in this article, and this is an important note, there are questions about whether Cartel de los Soles is an actual organization or an invention of the State Department, and the latter seems to be true, although I can't kind of conclusively debunk it at this point. I am looking for a guest to have on the Kyle Anzalone show to talk about Venezuela. If people have suggestions, either drop them in the comment section here or over on the Kyle Anzalone show channel. So Maduro responded with a mass mobilization of forces. He said, "This week I will activate a special plan to guarantee coverage of more than 4.5 million militia members throughout the national territory. Militias trained, activated, and armed. We defend our seas, our skies, our land. We liberated them. We guard them and patrol them. No empire will touch sacred soil of Venezuela, nor should it touch the sacred soil of South America." So on Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt explained that Trump has not ruled out using military force in Venezuela. She said President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. Trump backed a coup against Maduro during his first administration. The White House provided recognition and financial support to Juan Guaido after he declared himself to be president of Venezuela. Guaido's revolution never gained momentum, and he eventually fled the country. During Joe Biden's administration, Washington dropped support for Guaido. However, after Maduro won re-election last year, the White House claimed he rigged the election. The U.S. is currently claiming that Armando Gonzalez Urita should be considered the leader in Caracas, although, there's no actual practical reason to think that that guy is ever going to be president of the South American nation. Now, moving on, most of the headlines surrounding concern about Trump's authorization to use military force against cartels has centered around Mexico. And I have thought that that was maybe a little bit less likely, actually, than military intervention in Venezuela. Mexico is the U.S.'s largest trading partner, is a very large, and while the country does certainly have a lot of corruption, it does have a significant military that, they typically use against the cartels, I guess, but, certainly could try to be used to oppose a U.S. intervention. Additionally, I would have to hope that there's people in the Trump administration who might recognize that Mexico is a hell of a lot closer to the U.S. than Venezuela is, and certainly if we're carrying out military operations in Venezuela, killing civilians in Mexico, as Ted Galen Carpenter pointed out, I mean the ability of these cartels to hit back with like asymmetrical terrorist style attacks in the U.S. would be absolutely massive and a real problem. All right, so the next article here is about Mexico. Mexico denies joint operation with U.S. targeting cartel. So Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum Pedro said a statement from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency that Washington and Mexico City had agreed to conduct bilateral anti-cartel operations was untrue. So this is a statement from the DEA that was released, I believe, on Monday. The DEA announces a major new initiative to strengthen collaboration between the United States and Mexico in a fight against the cartels. whose trafficking networks are responsible for flooding American communities with deadly synthetic drugs. The DEA has launched a multi-week training and collaboration program at one of its intelligence centers on the southwest border. The program brings together Mexican investigators with U.S. law enforcement, prosecutors, defense officials, and members of the intelligence community. Over the course of several weeks, participants will identify joint targets, develop coordinated enforcement programs, and strengthen the exchange of intelligence. Sheinbaum said there was no basis for the DEA's statement. She explained, the DEA issued a statement. We don't know the basis for it. We haven't reached any agreement, nor have our security agencies with the DEA. Any joint statement must be done jointly. We don't confirm any statement issued by the United States when the Mexican government has not been consulted. So the DEA announcement followed President Donald Trump authorizing military operations against cartels designated as terrorist organizations, and the U.S. has blacklisted multiple Mexican cartels. Trump's order instructs the military to target cartels in international waters and even on foreign soil. Sheinbaum has pledged not to allow American soldiers to enter Mexico. Again, I think they're going to at least start with Venezuela. If it goes well, which I can't imagine that it would in Venezuela, they may try to expand it to other Latin American countries, but I would imagine, I'm guessing, predicting that we would see military action in Venezuela first. All right, moving on here. Ukrainian attack on Russian pipeline halts oil flow to Hungary. So a Ukrainian attack on the Druzhba, or I think it translates to Friendship Pipeline, caused a disruption in the flow of oil to Hungary, according to Budapest's top diplomat. So the Hungarian foreign minister wrote on Facebook, Ukraine has again attacked the petroleum pipeline to Hungary, resulting in the petroleum transportation to our country to a halt. Another attack against our energy security is outrageous and unacceptable. In March, a Ukrainian drone attack on the pipeline caused it to be shut down for a short time. Hungary reported that it was unclear when the oil flow would be restored after Monday's attack. The oil flow to Slovakia was also halted, although Slovakia doesn't and hasn't in the past made as big of a deal about the shutdown of the petroleum when the pipeline was attacked as Hungary does. One of the largest pipeline networks on Earth, the Friendship Pipeline begins in Russia and transports oil to Ukraine, Belarus, Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Germany. It stretches some 2,500 miles, and it is connected to several other smaller lines in the Baltics and Eastern Europe. The Hungarian foreign minister directed his ire at NATO and Ukraine for the attack. He said, and by the way, Hungary is a member of NATO. Brussels and Kiev have been trying to push Hungary into the war in Ukraine for 3.5 years, and the increasing number of Ukrainian attacks against our energy security are aiming at this. So let us be clear. Again, this is not our war. It has none of our business. We want to stay out of it. As long as we were in power, we will stay out of it. He went on to threaten Budapest could cut energy transfers to Kiev in response. Finally, a reminder for Ukrainian decision makers. Electricity from Hungary plays a key role in Ukraine's energy supply. Ukraine's foreign minister responded by saying that the attack was justified because Budapest refuses to cut ties with Moscow. It is Russia, not Ukraine, who began this war and refuses to end it. Hungary has been told for years that Moscow is an unreliable partner. Despite this, Hungary has made every effort to maintain its reliance on Russia. Even after the full-scale war began, you can now send your complaints and threats to your friends in Moscow. And the Hungarian foreign minister fired back, saying that oil transfers from Russia were in Hungary's interest, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has emerged as a notable opponent of the proxy war in Ukraine from within NATO and the European Union. As the organizations require consensus for some actions, Budapest's resistance to sanctioning Russia has frustrated some of its allies. Okay, next up here. Trump suggests security guarantees for Ukraine will include air support. Wrote this one for JudgeNap.com on August 19th. So, in an interview with Fox and Friends on Tuesday, President Donald Trump suggested that U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine could include European deployment of ground troops and American air support. So when it comes to security, they are willing to put people on the ground. They, in Trump's statement, is referring to Europe. We're willing to help them with things, especially probably if you talk about it by air, because nobody has the stuff that we have. The statement follows Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday and a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky and European leaders at the White House on Monday. So, after the meeting with Zelensky, Trump wrote on Truth Social, "During the meeting, we discussed security guarantees for Ukraine, which guarantees would be provided by the various European countries with a coordination with the United States of America. Everyone is very happy about the possibility for peace for Russia and Ukraine." So following the meeting with Trump, American officials said Putin was open to the West providing Ukraine with security guarantees. Russia has previously rejected assurances for Ukraine that involved Western troop deployments, but Trump appears optimistic. I'm not sure why this is the case, and I wrote this one for the Libertarian Institute on August 20th. Russia's foreign ministry ruled this out. This is the statement for the Russian foreign ministry. "We reaffirm our repeatedly stated position on our categorical rejection of any scenarios that envision the appearance in Ukraine of a major military contingent with the participation of NATO countries, which is fraught with an uncontrolled escalation of the conflict with unpredictable consequences." And so Russia is pretty clearly saying no to that. Next up here, this article I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on August 19th. North Korea to accelerate nuclear program in response to U.S. and South Korean war games. As I mentioned on the show recently that the U.S. and South Korea were planning to kick off major war games, and this was sure to upset North Korea. So I believe they conducted some artillery drills in response, and then Kim Jong-un made this statement. "The security environment around the DPRK," that's the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, "is getting more serious day by day, and the prevailing situation requires us to make radical and swift changes in the existing military theory and practice the rapid expansion of nuclearization. The U.S. South Korea joint military exercises are being staged again from now is a clear expression of the stand of openly revealing their intention to remain most hostile and confrontational to North Korea. That the U.S. South Korean intensified military nexus and the muscle flexing are the most obvious manifestation of their will to ignite a war and the source of destroying the peace and security environment in the region." On Monday, the U.S. and South Korea kicked off large-scale war games dubbed Freedom Shield 25 that will run for 11 days. 21,000 soldiers will participate in the exercises. Washington and Seoul decided to divide the war games. Half of the drills will be conducted next month. And there are some reports this was done with an eye on North Korea to try to prevent upsetting Pyongyang too much with the military drills. However, I worry that this may have the opposite effect by dividing the war games. You're essentially having 2 rounds of the war games, each would still be pretty large scale war games. You know, it's not that they scaled them down super far. Still 21,000 troops participating. This is massive military drills. And so I think this is actually going to have the result of upsetting Kim twice rather than not upsetting him at all, or only doing it once by holding all the war games at one period of time. All right, so this is important to note. Trump bats Netanyahu's plan to destroy Hamas. And so, in the most clear green light that Trump has given Netanyahu for increasing military operations in the Gaza Strip, he wrote on Truth Social, "We will only see the return of the remaining hostages when Hamas is confronted and destroyed. The sooner this takes place, the better the chances of success will be." And of course, this is obviously untrue. Everybody, the IDF, the family members of the hostages, general Israeli civilians, have all said, as well as, you know, a lot of international observers, analysts, and experts, that if the U.S. goes through with this attack, that's actually, or not the U.S., excuse me, if Israel goes through with this attack, launches this assault on Gaza City, Deir al-Balah, where the remaining hostages are believed to be held, it will actually lead to the deaths of the hostages. Hamas has given the orders to the hostage captives to execute the hostages if there's a risk that they are going to be freed by the Israeli soldiers. Additionally, Israeli soldiers have killed a good number of their own hostages, and so the likelihood of success of freeing the hostages by force seems rather low. When you look at, I think maybe 4 hostages have ever been freed by a military raid. Certainly, I guess it's easy to count about 10 Israeli captives that have been killed either by Hamas or Israeli operations to free them. And then there's been 139 total, I think at this point, hostages who have been released through ceasefire deals. So there's a very clear path to releasing the hostages, and that is not the path that Netanyahu and Donald Trump are on. Another article I wrote for JudgeNap.com on the 18th, Israel's starvation policy of Palestinians is deliberate policy. This from Amnesty International. So this is the report from Amnesty. Israel is carrying out a deliberate campaign of starvation in the occupied Gaza Strip, systematically destroying the health, well-being, and social fabric of Palestinian life. The deadly combination of hunger and disease is not an unfortunate byproduct of Israel's military operations. It is the intended outcome of plans and policies that Israel has designed and implemented over the past 22 months to deliberately inflict on Palestinians the conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction, which is a part and parcel of Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, a very clear condemnation, the kind of thing that when history writes about this moment, they're going to look at this report from Amnesty International, a relatively well-respected human rights group in the United States of America, and say that if this group is calling it in clear day a genocide, and people just don't seem to care all that much. You know, certainly it's not an outrage to most Americans that Donald Trump is backing Israel to the extent that he is, even if it's in our face every day that a genocide is going on. So IDF is planning assault on Gaza City with 80,000 troops. I just wanted to mention this to understand the size and the scale of the assault that Israel is about to launch on Gaza City. I read they're going to call up an additional 60,000 reservists for this. And so a second question that I think may be important to ask here is how much will this stretch Israel's military if they end up bogged down in Gaza City, if Hamas puts up a real fight? How hard is it going to be on the Israeli military to finish off this genocide? I mean, you know, relatively, Israel has amount of military dominance over Hamas as far as, you know, tanks and helicopters and warplanes and bombs and missiles and all kinds of things Israel has that Hamas doesn't. But a lot of those things become less and less important as you're fighting in urban environments, fighting on the ground. If Hamas is able to, work among the civilian population, I think it's going to present a lot of difficulty for the IDF. Now, the IDF solution to this hasn't necessarily been to try to figure out a different way to go about this. Although the IDF has suggested that the real way to release the hostages, or has outright said the real way to release the hostages is through a ceasefire deal, and that military operations would endanger them. The Israel, I think, is just going to conduct widespread bombing. They're not really going to put their troops in danger because if there's any people in Gaza, whether Hamas or civilians in Gaza City, that is, they're just going to all be exterminated. It's not that the Israelis are going to fight an insurgency embedded in the civilian population, because they'll just kill the civilians to solve the problem. All right, next up here, this one from Dave DeCamp. Israeli attacks killed dozens across Gaza as Israel prepares to forcibly displace Palestinians from Gaza City. And so the Israeli military's Arabic language spokesman announced on Saturday that the IDF would begin its evacuation of Palestinian civilians from Gaza City on Sunday. He added that Israel would allow tents and other equipment for shelter to be allowed through the Karim Shalom crossing in southern Gaza. They're not going to let in enough tents, that's for sure. A lot of these people, if they leave, are going to be made homeless. They're not going to let in enough food, so while they're in their tents, they're going to be starving. And some of the people won't leave, and they're going to declare all the people there terrorists, and I think they're going to just kill everyone left behind. It's going to be a massacre. Now, once the Palestinians are forced from Gaza City, they're going to be forced into a concentration camp in southern Rafah, and from there, they're only going to be allowed to exit the Gaza Strip. We do have, I think this is for the first time, a report that any country is actively considering taking in the Palestinians once they're expelled from the concentration camp. And so this one I wrote for JudgeSnap.com on the 19th. South Sudan considers taking Palestinians expelled from Gaza to curry favor with Donald Trump. So South Sudan is engaging in talks with Israel about accepting Palestinians forced from Gaza. Juba hopes that making a deal with Tel Aviv will help South Sudan improve its standing in Washington. While South Sudan has publicly denied reports it was talking with Israel about hosting Palestinians expelled from Gaza, the New York Times reports that the country's leadership is privately considering the offer. The Times explained that South Sudan would take in the Palestinians to curry favor with President Trump. South Sudan is hesitant to take the Palestinians out of fear it will have to shoulder the long-term financial burden of a large refugee population. South Sudan has suffered from internal conflict throughout its short history as a nation and also intense poverty. Tel Aviv has been seeking a country to take in Palestinians since launching an assault on Gaza following the October 7th Hamas attack. Countries reported to have been approached by Israel denied the accusations or said they rejected Tel Aviv. President Trump says he supports removing all Palestinians from Gaza and preventing them from returning to their homeland. After expelling the Palestinians, Trump wants to build a resort city in the Strip. Ethnically cleansing Gaza would be a war crime. Many countries have rejected participating in this scheme to deport the Palestinians because it would be the crime of genocide. But the U.S. doesn't have problems supporting Israel. This one from Dave DeCamp, August 20th, antiwar.com. Report Pentagon to spend $3.5 billion replenishing munitions it used to defend Israel. The Pentagon is planning to spend at least $3.5 billion replenishing the weapons it has just used defending Israel, Bloomberg reported on Tuesday. The report cited budget documents prepared through mid-May, meaning the $3.5 billion doesn't include the cost for the U.S.-Israeli war that was launched against Iran on June 13th and lasted 12 days. The document says the spending is necessary to make up for the cost to the U.S. Central Command amid response to the situation in Israel or other hostile actions emanating from it, as well as U.S. combat operations executed at the request of or in coordination with Israel for the defense of Israeli territory, personnel, or assets during attacks by Iran or its allies. The single biggest request was for $1 billion to replenish various models of standard missile interceptors, which are primarily fired by U.S. Navy warships and are produced by Raytheon. The request was mainly for SM-31B threat upgrade interceptors, which are used to shoot down ballistic missiles and cost between 9 and 12 million per munition. It's important to note here too that and Daryl Cooper explained this. He worked in missile defense when he was in the military, and he explained on the Kyle Anzalone show when I interviewed him that most of the time to shoot down a ballistic missile, you're actually firing between 2 and 4 of these interceptors, not just one. And so that means the cost of shooting down a ballistic missile would be between $36 and $48 million per incoming ballistic missile. Absurd cost that the U.S. is paying to defend Israel when we don't have to do any of it. Israel could live in peace with its neighbors. It just can't go to war against its neighbors without facing any consequences. Next up here, another $500 million for Israel. U.S. to fund $500 million Boeing KC-46 tanker aircraft deal for Israel. The Israeli military announced on Wednesday that it will be signing a contract purchasing 2 Boeing-made KC-46 tanker aircraft in a deal worth about $500 million that will be funded by the U.S. military. No surprise there. Next up, this one I wrote for the Institute on August 20th. Israel-Australia feud over Palestinians escalates. And so this is a result of first France, then the UK, then Canada, and now Australia. 4 Western countries, 4 U.S. allies, all saying that they are going to recognize Palestine as a UN member state at the upcoming summit in the UN General Assembly summit in September, and Netanyahu is attacking them for doing so. Netanyahu attacked Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese as being weak in a rant on X on Tuesday. History will remember Albanese for what he is, a weak politician who betrayed Israel and abandoned Australia's Jews. Australian Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke hit back at Netanyahu on Wednesday. He said, "Strength is not measured by how many people you can blow up or how many children you can leave hungry. What we've seen with some of the actions they are taking is a continued isolation of Israel from the world, and this is not in their interest either." Albanese downplayed the Israeli leader's remarks, saying he doesn't take these things as personally as Netanyahu does. So I thought that was kind of a funny response. And last up here, Marjorie Taylor Greene slammed State Department for banning injured Palestinian children, allowing accused child sex predator to return to Israel. So, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene blasted the State Department on X after it barred injured Palestinian children from entering the U.S. to seek medical treatment. She also criticized state for allowing an Israeli official charged with sex crimes against children to leave the country. She wrote on X, "Two recent decisions made by the State Department both involve children. We need to be the America that allows war-torn children to come here for life-saving injuries, and the America that never releases a foreign child sex predator that our great law enforcement caught. But in these circumstances, those war-torn children from Gaza and this foreign child sex predator is from Israel and works directly for Netanyahu." So Greene is referring to a recent decision by the State Department blocking the entry of Palestinians to the U.S. Many of the Palestinians entering the U.S. are children seeking medical treatment. The treatment was funded by private charities. Israel's onslaught in Gaza has killed and injured a large number of Palestinian children. The Gaza Health Ministry has recorded nearly 19,000 children killed during the Israeli assault on Gaza since October 7, 2023. Additionally, children are suffering from illness and malnutrition. Over 100 Palestinian children have starved to death under the Israeli siege. On the second story Greene referenced in her post was the arrest of Tom Alitz Androvich in Las Vegas. He is accused of sex crimes against children. He is a senior official in the Israeli National Cyber Directorate. After he was released on bail, Alzdrovic was allowed to return to Israel. The State Department denies it had a role in allowing the Israeli official to leave the country. Green believes he was only allowed to leave the country because of the special relationship between Tel Aviv and Washington. She wrote, and the most concerning question is, when and how did America become so subservient to Israel that it immediately released a child sex predator after arrest with a 100% lockup cases with evidence and let him off to fly back home to Israel, she wrote. So I think this is a very important story, and maybe something that will start to wake some more Americans up to the special relationship between Israel and Washington and how it does not serve the United States of America or Americans. All right, everybody, that's where I'm wrapping up the show for today, but don't forget to check out the Kyle Anzalone show today at 4:45 Eastern. Jeremy R. Hammond. Thanks, everyone.